Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today, or as wonderful as it can be considering it's Monday. Today we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from PDV Sky. No water filter change? No problemo. Let's jump right in. So I used to be a bar manager, which is an understatement. I used to do literally everything in that place, but that's another story. And I had a team of 6 people, waiters, cooks, and clean staff. So I used to deal with the everyday life of the bar, and here in Brazil, it is obligatory for the company to provide drinkable, filtered water to employees. So we had 2 water filters in the bar, one in the counter and one in the kitchen. Water filters must change filters every 3 months to continue to filter, and ours had a little red button that would light when change was needed. The first time the red light turned on, I did what I assumed was the most logical thing to do. Went to a nearby store and bought the filter. I paid around $25 converted, changed the filter, and went on with the daily routine. End of the week comes and I go to the office to close the week. Basically, I go there and give them the cash that we earned and they pay me whatever it is I had to buy for the bar. I give them the filter receipt. The guy asks me, "Did you have authorization to buy this filter?" And I said, "Well, no, we needed the filter and I bought it." And he responded that he needed to talk to the boss to see if that was okay. A week goes by and my boss calls me asking for a meeting that afternoon, which was unusual since they usually scheduled in advance. I go to the meeting and listen for half an hour how it is completely unacceptable for me to make a big purchase without authorization, and that the company had a purchasing department that makes these kinds of purchases, and that every big purchase I make, I need to send them an email and they will take care for me. They also said that the same filter was $16 online, and that I was wasting company money. So I apologize and say it won't happen again. Around a month goes by and the other filter in the kitchen also needed filter replacement. So I do as I've been told, send the purchasing team an email. A week goes by, no response. The other Monday, I receive an email asking for photos. The first email has the exact model written of the filter. I respond promptly with photos of the filter. 1 month goes by and no filter for the kitchen. I tell the kitchen staff that if they need water, they can ask me and I'll fill a jar with fresh water from the other filter. One of the days I go to the office and they ask me about the filter, and I tell them that it hasn't arrived yet. Boss was there and gets furious, calls purchasing team and makes them buy the filter online that instant. Another month goes by and the filter hasn't arrived. The other filter also needed replacement again. So I start telling the staff to get bottled water and to write every one down so I can count stock later. Around 30 bottles go in a week. I buy a lot of bottled water. The team asks me if we're getting more demand for bottles of water in the bar. I tell them no. The filters that were purchased online arrive. They don't fit. I tell the management team. They ask me to leave the filters at the office because they will change with the correct ones. I do so the same day. Staff still drinking bottled water. 3 months pass by. The filters are still seen on the office when I finally leave that company for good. One of my old employees and friends still works there. He told me they're still drinking bottled water and the new manager doesn't even know there are filters to be used. Okay, not bad OP, but you should have kept a running tally of how many bottles of water were being purchased and then comparing that to the price of the filter cost, and then presented the total expenditures to the boss and purchasing right when you left. Do me a quick favor and take a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're actually not subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. This next story comes to us from Urban ACC. You want everything the same color? Give me a day or two. Let's jump right in. Way back when, I lived in a student dormitory in a city in the Netherlands. This wasn't a US-style dorm. Each student had their own room, but we shared a shower, a toilet, and a kitchen. Between 16 people. Oh, joyful days. Anyhow, by the time I entered the flat, it was already 30 years old and falling to bits. So the student housing department decided to renovate the building, basically stripping it. We all got replacement rooms and a sum of money to piss off without making a fuss. So far, all good. Cue my neighbor's exit. By contract, we had to leave the room as we found it. That meant seeing to it that all the power plugs worked and filling up all the holes you'd made for hanging posters and lamps on the wall. It had become something of a tradition to perform the latter task using toothpaste. It was mainly laziness, since proper toothpaste is a good deal more expensive than wall filler. Anywho, it's what most of us did, except that my neighbor brushed her teeth with Parodontax, which uses a sort of off-pink Adobe-ish color of paste, and stupidly used said brand to fill the holes in her wall. So come inspection time, the holes she had filled with it on a white wall stuck out like sore thumbs. After about a week, she received a letter stating that she needed to make sure the walls were uniformly the same color, or face 1,000 guilder, about 800 euros in today's money fine, plus the loss of her 300 guilder deposit, within 3 days. This in spite of the fact that the rooms would be demolished shortly after, and that the student housing department was very lax when they actually had to do any repairs. After about 3 minutes of indignation, we threw together enough funds to visit the DIY store armed with a tube of Parodontax toothpaste, had a can of paint mixed with exactly that color, returned, and repainted the entire room, including everything in it, in solid Parodontax pink. When the inspector showed up a week later, he just stood there flabbergasted while my neighbor shoved his own letter in his face. The relevant sentence about uniformity indicated in yellow marker. She never heard anything about it again. I'm guessing the person who had to go in and inspect after a move out to make sure that all the holes were filled and everything was painted uniformly wasn't the same person who knew that the place was going to be torn apart afterwards. So that's why this happened. I think if they'd gone and argued this with the housing department, they wouldn't have had to do this in the end, and it would have saved them some money on paint as well. This next story comes to us from Fully Half Baked. You can't badge back in if you haven't badged out? Let's jump right in. Many years ago, I worked at a company that did phone tech support for a particular piece of well-known business software. After outgrowing the building we'd been in, the company moved to an enormous warehouse building they'd renovated into offices and cube space. The new building had separate parking areas for visitors, of which we basically had none, and employees who had to park in the rear. As part of the move, they got a new security crew who had very specific ideas about access security. First, the entrances were keyed so that you had to badge in, use your ID to unlock the door. This included the visitor's entrance. Reception had to unlock the door for visitors. Second, all doors except the front guest entrance and the rear employee's entrance were switched to exits only, and didn't have a badge reader to unlock the door from the outside. Third, they forbade anyone from permitting drafting, aka allowing someone else to enter behind you, so that you had to badge in to enter. Several people got write-ups for allowing people to come in after them just to make that point. Fourth, and the reason for the story, you had to badge out to prime your badge so that you could badge in. For fire safety, you could exit by any door without badging out, but if you did, you couldn't unlock a door to re-enter, and had to walk around to the visitor's entrance to have reception let you in. Because the front and rear entrances were around 500 meters, a quarter mile from each other, it was easy to have to waste 10 minutes getting back in the building if you forgot to badge out, and in 40 Celsius, 100 degree Fahrenheit weather for much of the summer. The explanation we were given was that they needed to know how many people were in the building in case it had to be evacuated. Of course, that information was on computers that were only accessible inside the building. So, after the first couple days during which I and nearly everyone I knew had locked themselves out at least once, I realized what I had to do. Starting on day 3, I'd enter the building and, immediately after getting through the doors, smack my badge against the exit reader to prime it to let me re-enter. Every time a coworker saw me entering the building, they'd ask me what I was doing, which I'd happily explain. Within a couple of weeks, I didn't see a single person coming through the doors who didn't swing around and smack their badge against the exit reader. And at the beginning of the next month, security sent out an email that they were no longer requiring exit badging. I like to believe that it was my doing, although it's also possible that reception was sick and tired of dealing with the lunch return rush and constantly let the smokers back into the building, never mess with reception. A system like that only works if you're required to badge out on your way out. I understand the fire requirements, so have doors that are fire exits where if somebody pushes that door open, it sets off the fire alarm and everybody has to exit the building. On the doors that they're required to use to leave the building on a regular basis, have a badge out station there where they have to badge out to open the door. Otherwise, have a fire bar on it, and if they go out without badging out, it sets off the alarm. This next story comes to us from the Greenskeeper 420. Fix this machine at all costs, but don't spend any money? Sure, let's jump right in. About 5 years ago, I found myself as a second shift supervisor at a small manufacturing plant. We had a line of 8 machines with 4 others that could be added to the end of the line with a series of pipes and blowers. It all started when my boss, plant manager, said, "I don't really read the report that you send to me at the end of the day." He was trying to get a second, much larger plant running to make our small plant redundant and increase our capacity by around 8-fold, so he decided to not even be involved with the small plant. Okay, cool. Well, the company wasn't doing too hot. We had a ton of demand, but the orders were so large that we just didn't have the capacity to fill them. I, along with about 5 other people, worked 8 weeks straight from the beginning of July to the end of August with only 2 days off during that 8 weeks, and as salaried employees at $30,000 a year and not eligible for OT. I was not a happy camper. With the plant running around the clock, a lot of preventative maintenance was being neglected. I went to the plant manager and said, "Hey, if we don't shut down for a day or two and replace the bearings and the rollers in the 6th machine in the line, they're going to freeze up and the motor that turns those rollers is going to burn up." He said, "Just fix it, but don't spend any money." So at the end of the night, I put in my daily report that if the motor burned up, I would ask maintenance to pull an identical motor from one of the machines that were not connected to the current line configuration. And that way, we could finish this order, and to please respond if he wanted to do something different, and CC'd the head of maintenance on the email. I never heard back from him, so after about a week, the bearings froze up and the motor quit working. I put my request into maintenance, and they pulled the motor of the machine not being used and replaced it to finish a major order. The day we were finishing the major order that we had been working on for months, the plant manager walks up to me and the head of maintenance and says, "You all need to hook those extra 4 machines up and start on the next order as soon as we get this one out the door." Maintenance head and I look at each other, then back at him, and I said, "Sorry, we can't do that. We don't have a motor to run the last machine. I sent you an email about it a few weeks ago, and you never replied that you wanted to do something different. It is probably around $10,000 for another motor, and we can hook it up tomorrow if you overnight it." Well, plant manager blew a major gasket because we all knew the company was on its last legs. 4 days later, the CEO called a mandatory meeting at 4 o'clock on the last day of the pay period and let the entire staff go. I got unemployment and took it easy for a few months before starting my MBA and getting into data analytics. So the plant manager, the person in charge of running that plant and making sure everything is as efficient as possible, told you to fix it but don't spend any money. I think I can see why the company might have gone under. Also on this one, I'm not sure of the statute of limitations, but in a lot of places, salaried employees are still eligible for OT as long as they haven't signed a paper saying they're exempt. So that's something to think about. You could probably still get paid for that OT if the company isn't long gone. This next story comes to us from Long Bong. Automated my useless boss out of her job. Let's jump right in. This happened a few years ago. I was a data and reporting analyst and did all the ad hoc reports for the company. My boss, we'll call her Carrie, was useless. She was one of these people that was always late, left early, and took days off at short notice. The only thing of value she did was all the regular reports, sales, revenue, etc. We suspected she got away with it because she was having an affair with her boss. We'll call him Stuart. Our CEO was a fairly decent bloke. He'd look for ways to cut costs and would pay regular bonuses for the best cost-saving initiatives. Carrie was very keen to submit ideas, and encouraged us all to automate our tasks so she could try and take the credit for the savings. On one of her Skive days, which coincidentally Stuart was sick as well, the CEO was desperate for the sales report my boss does. I said I'd give it a look and see if I could get it done. Normally, she'd spend 2 to 3 days doing it each week, but the CEO wanted it that afternoon. A quick inspection of the data showed it would be quite easy to automate, so I knocked up the necessary script and got it over to the CEO, who was super impressed that not only had I got it done in a couple of hours, but also that it could be updated whenever he needed it. He asked if I could also look at the revenue, churn, and a couple of other reports. Over that afternoon, I automated everything my boss did. Both Carrie and Stuart were back in the next day, but were immediately summoned to the CEO's office before being suspended and sent home. Turns out, the CEO knew they were having an affair, and all the times they were sick or late or had to leave early was so they could sneak off and go at each other. He'd not done anything about it because of how important these reports were. Now, they were automated. He was able to get them suspended and later fired for gross misconduct for all the time they'd taken off. I also got a nice bonus out of it. I think there's a lot of old school workers in a lot of businesses out there that don't realize how easily they could be replaced by automation. I mean, you can learn how to code by watching YouTube videos these days. My 9-year-old could probably write a script that could put somebody out of a job. That's just the way things are going these days. Check out all 5 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.